A woman watched a spider crawl on her arm. This is what happened to her mind. Kate is a 28-year-old marketing coordinator, presenting to the emergency department with what appears to be a panic attack. She's hyperventilating. Her hands are trembling. She keeps checking her arms, her neck, her legs, frantically brushing at her skin as if removing invisible debris. The triage nurse notes her vitals: heart rate 142 beats per minute, blood pressure 168/95, respiratory rate 32 breaths per minute. All elevated, all consistent with acute anxiety. But Kate insists something else is wrong. "I can feel them," she tells the attending physician. "They're everywhere. I know they're not real, but I can feel them." To understand what happened to Kate, we need to go back 3 weeks. Kate was working from home, like any other Tuesday afternoon. She lived in a renovated apartment in the Pacific Northwest. Beautiful hardwood floors, large windows, exposed brick. The kind of place that looks perfect in photographs. She was on a video call when she felt something on her left forearm. Looking down, she saw a spider. Not a large spider, maybe the size of a dime including its legs. A common house spider, Parasteatota tepidariorum. Completely harmless. Most people would simply brush it off. Some might even cup it gently and release it outside. But when Kate saw that spider, something in her brain activated a circuit that would fundamentally alter her perception of reality. She jerked her arm violently. The spider fell to the floor and scurried away. And then Kate noticed something strange. She could still feel it. Even though the spider was gone, the sensation remained. A crawling, tingling feeling exactly where the spider had been. She looked at her arm, and nothing there. She rubbed the spot vigorously. The feeling persisted. Over the next few days, the sensation expanded. It wasn't just her left forearm anymore. She'd feel phantom crawling on her right arm, then her legs, then her neck. Kate began checking constantly, rolling up her sleeves, running her hands through her hair, inspecting every inch of exposed skin. She started sleeping in long sleeves and pants, lights on. She installed dozens of spider traps around her apartment, but the sensations kept coming. By week 2, Kate wasn't sleeping more than 3 hours a night. She'd wake up convinced something was crawling on her. She'd strip the bedding, vacuum the mattress, inspect the ceiling. Nothing, but the feeling never stopped. This is formication. Formication. From the Latin formica, meaning ant. The sensation of insects crawling on or under the skin when no insects are present. It's a type of paresthesia, abnormal sensation, and it can become so severe that it drives people to desperate measures. Your skin contains approximately 2.5 million sensory receptors. These mechanoreceptors constantly send signals to your brain about pressure, temperature, pain, and texture. Under normal circumstances, your brain filters this information efficiently, ignoring irrelevant signals and focusing on genuine threats. But trauma, physical or psychological, can dysregulate this system. When the spider crawled on Kate's arm, it activated her mechanoreceptors in a specific pattern. But more importantly, it activated her amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. The amygdala tagged this sensation as dangerous, creating what neuroscientists call a fear memory. Here's where it gets interesting. The amygdala doesn't just store fear memories, it actively predicts threats based on past experiences. Through a process called predictive coding, your brain is constantly generating expectations about sensory input. When the actual input matches the prediction, you barely notice. But when there's a mismatch, your brain pays intense attention. In Kate's case, her amygdala became hyperactive. It started predicting spider sensations constantly. Any ambiguous stimulus, a hair moving across her skin, a light breeze, the natural tingling of nerve endings, was interpreted as a spider. Her somatosensory cortex, the brain region that processes touch, was essentially being hijacked by her fear circuitry. This created a vicious cycle. The more she felt phantom spiders, the more vigilant she became. The more vigilant she became, the more her brain amplified weak sensory signals. What started as a single spider encounter had evolved into a full-blown phobic response with somatic hallucinations. By week 3, Kate had stopped going to work. She couldn't focus. She couldn't sit still. Every minor sensation sent her into a spiral of checking and rechecking. Her boyfriend found her one evening in the bathroom, having scratched her forearm raw trying to get them off. What Kate had developed was acute specific phobia with secondary somatic symptom disorder. Specific phobia is characterized by intense, irrational fear of a specific object or situation. In this case, spiders, arachnophobia. But what made Kate's case unusual was the development of persistent tactile hallucinations. Research from the Netherlands in 2018 examined this phenomenon in detail. Dr. Marié-Anne Rot at the University of Groningen found that approximately 15% of individuals with severe specific phobias develop what they termed sensory intrusions, phantom sensations related to their phobic stimulus. What Kate had developed was acute specific phobia with secondary somatic symptom disorder. Specific phobia is characterized by intense, irrational fear of a specific object or situation. In this case, spiders, arachnophobia. But what made Kate's case unusual was the development of persistent tactile hallucinations. Research from the Netherlands in 2018 examined this phenomenon in detail. Dr. Marié-Anne Rot at the University of Groningen found that approximately 15% of individuals with severe specific phobias develop what they termed sensory intrusions, phantom sensations related to their phobic stimulus. The mechanism involves sensitization of the somatosensory cortex through a process called long-term potentiation. Essentially, the neural pathways associated with detecting the phobic stimulus become so well practiced that they fire spontaneously, creating sensations without external input. It's similar to phantom limb syndrome, where amputees feel sensations in limbs that no longer exist. The brain's body map remains active even when input is absent. In Kate's case, her brain had created a hyperactive spider detection system that was now firing false alarms constantly. Dr. Park consulted with psychiatry. Together, they developed a treatment plan that addressed both the acute symptoms and the underlying neural dysregulation. First, immediate relief. They prescribed a short-acting benzodiazepine to calm Kate's acute anxiety and allow her to sleep. They also started her on sertraline, an SSRI that has shown efficacy in treating both phobias and somatic symptom disorders by modulating serotonin in both the amygdala and somatosensory cortex. But medication alone wouldn't fix the underlying problem. The real treatment would require retraining Kate's brain through exposure therapy, specifically a protocol called graded interoceptive exposure. Here's how it works. Traditional exposure therapy for arachnophobia involves gradually increasing contact with spiders. First pictures, then videos, then real spiders at a distance, eventually working up to touching one. But Kate wasn't primarily afraid of spiders anymore. She was afraid of the sensation of spiders. Her therapist, Dr. Nguyen, started with sensory discrimination training. She had Kate close her eyes while applying various stimuli to her skin: a soft brush, a piece of fabric, a feather, even a small toy spider. Kate had to identify what she felt. Initially, Kate interpreted every ambiguous sensation as a spider, but gradually, with repeated trials, her brain began to recalibrate. She learned to distinguish between different types of touch. More importantly, she learned that the sensation of something crawling on her skin didn't automatically mean danger. They combined this with mindfulness techniques. When Kate felt phantom crawling, instead of immediately checking and scratching, she practiced observing the sensation without judgment, noticing it, describing it, accepting it, watching it change and eventually fade. This approach leverages something neuroscientists call extinction learning. When a fear memory is repeatedly activated without negative consequences, the brain slowly weakens the association between the stimulus and the threat response. It doesn't erase the original memory, but it creates a new competing memory, a safety signal that says, "This sensation is not dangerous." The amygdala learns to stand down. The somatosensory cortex stops amplifying weak signals. The predictive coding system recalibrates to baseline. It took 6 weeks of intensive therapy, but Kate's symptoms gradually improved. The formication episodes became less frequent, less intense. When they did occur, they lasted minutes instead of hours. She was able to return to work. She started sleeping normally again. By 3 months post-treatment, Kate reported only occasional phantom sensations, usually triggered by high stress. But now she had tools to manage them. She could recognize what was happening. She could use her breathing techniques, her sensory discrimination skills, her cognitive reframing. The spider that crawled on her arm 3 months earlier had triggered a cascade of neural changes that nearly derailed her life. But with proper understanding and treatment, those changes were reversible. Phobias are among the most common mental health conditions, affecting approximately 12% of adults at some point in their lives. Most people think of phobias as simple, excessive fears, irrational perhaps, but manageable. But cases like Kate's reveal something more complex. Phobias aren't just emotional reactions, they're neurological conditions that can fundamentally alter perception, creating sensory experiences that feel completely real. The human brain is an incredible prediction machine, constantly generating expectations about the world. Usually, this serves us well. It allows us to respond quickly to threats, to navigate complex environments efficiently. But when the prediction system becomes dysregulated, when fear memories become overactive, the brain can start predicting threats that don't exist. It can generate sensations, even hallucinations, based purely on expectation. Kate's story illustrates an important principle in neuroscience and psychology. The line between perception and hallucination is thinner than we'd like to believe. Your experience of reality is always a construction. Your brain's best guess about what's happening based on sensory input, prior experience, and emotional state. Change any of these variables, and your experience changes too. This is why trauma can have such profound effects on perception. It's not that trauma victims are making things up or being dramatic. Their brains have been fundamentally altered by experience, creating genuine changes in how they process sensory information. The good news is that the brain's plasticity works both ways. The same neural mechanisms that allowed Kate's phobia to develop also allowed her to recover. Through targeted therapy, her brain learned new patterns, formed new associations, recalibrated its prediction systems. Kate continues to do well. She still doesn't love spiders, probably never will, but she can coexist with them. She can see one in her apartment and simply relocate it without panic. And most importantly, she's reclaimed her body from the phantom sensations that once controlled her life. Her case reminds us that mental health conditions are not character flaws or failures of willpower. They're biological processes, changes in neural circuitry that can be understood, treated, and often reversed with the right interventions. The spider that crawled on Kate's arm was harmless. The fear it triggered was not, but neither was permanent. Understanding how phobias develop, how single experiences can cascade into chronic symptoms, is the first step toward treating them effectively. Kate's brain learned to fear, and then it learned to heal. If you or someone you know is struggling with a phobia or anxiety disorder that's interfering with daily life, reach out to a mental health professional. Treatment is available. Recovery is possible. The patterns that form can also be reformed. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment below about what topic you'd like covered next. And remember, your brain is powerful, but it's also trainable. Sometimes the most important thing it can learn is when not to sound the alarm. Take care of yourself and each other.